see if I can get through this entire video without getting interrupted by the baby. Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jessa. I make a lot of lifestyle videos and cozy hobby vlogs. Today I'm going to be giving you my 2024 reading wrap up. My reading goal for 2024 was to read 36 books. I just wanted to average at least 3 books a month. Somewhere in between the beginning of the year and the end of the year, I kind of changed my goal from like reading every single day to just reading Monday through Friday. Sometimes I would say like, okay, well, I want to read 100 pages a day, and then that would change because I wouldn't be able to meet that goal. And then I would say, okay, well, I just want to read like 1 book a week. And sometimes that would be like a little bit easier, and just depends on what kind of book I'm reading. There are certain books that I was, a little bit more wrapped up in and was more excited to read, and other books that were lagging a lot and really slowed me down and were kind of like boring me, so it took a lot longer for me to get into them. But I am happy to report that I did reach my goal of 36 books. In fact, I read 38 books. That is including 3 audiobooks, but I am including them in this wrap up anyways. I was logging all of my reading through a habit app on my phone that I was introduced to it by my sister, and she uses it as well. It's one of those like habit apps where you can kind of like check in with your friends basically. So luckily I was keeping track of all the books that I read. It's an app called, what is it called? Habit Share. So obviously you can track any other types of habits that you want to keep track of, but like I have on here my morning skincare, working out, evening skincare, reading, and then outside time. But reading was really the only one that I was like logging pretty religiously. So let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Okay, that's too much. So the very first book that I read in January of 2024 was The Ex-Hex. And The Ex-Hex is by Erin Sterling. I had originally actually started reading The Ex-Hex, or I started listening to The Ex-Hex on audiobook. We were driving from California to Utah, and it was my turn to drive, and I was like, okay, I need something to listen to. And so I decided to start with The Ex-Hex, but I quickly stopped listening to it, like literally before even getting to the end of the chapter, because I just could not stand the narrator's voice. There's some people who I really like how they narrate. I really like their voice and like their cadence, and then there's some people who I just can't stand. It seemed like every time she was reading a sentence, everything was like a question. And I was just like, that's not how I would read it in my head. So I was like, forget it. I'm just going to check out the book from the library and I'm going to read it myself. So that's what I did. I started it on January 8th and I finished it on January 14th. I only had 2 sittings. So literally had 5 whole days in between the time that I started it and the time that I finished it. But I really enjoyed it very much. I don't have a rating on here. I wasn't at the point yet where I was like putting my ratings, but I want to say that it was probably around anywhere between like a 4 and 4.5, maybe even a 5. But I did really enjoy it. It is a little bit spicy, so just keep that in mind. I'm a big witchy romance kind of gal. There's only been a couple of witchy romances that I've picked up and didn't like, but this one was a good one, and it's part of a series. The second book that I read in the month of January was The Fairy Bargains of Prospect Hill. This one I started on the 17th. I read it again on the 22nd, the 23rd, the 26th, and then I finished it on the 28th. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sittings that I did. But again, like there are several days in between when I read them. This one was a really good book. I really enjoyed it. A little bit more suspenseful than other books that I've picked up before. And it definitely dived deeper into like the Fae realm. This is probably like the first one that, or actually no, this isn't the first one because I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies before I read this one. That was probably my gateway into like the fairy world. I feel like with Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, it's very factual of like the different types of fae and like what they're like. This one dealt with fairy bargains, and honestly, it made me more scared of Fae. Have you ever seen those TikToks of people who like come across like mushroom circles and like someone's like, oh, like let's go check this out, and the other person's like, nope, I'm out. After I read this book, that's how I felt. I was just like, yeah, you don't mess with the Fae. Don't be messing with them. You know what I mean? But I really enjoyed it. I think it was a very original story, and it hit home a little bit because there is some involvement with children, and that part was really hard for me to. It wasn't hard, but I feel like I'm being dramatic about it. Anything that I read with like kids involved, I get really sensitive about because obviously I'm a mother, and things just hit a little too close to home sometimes. So once the kids got involved with the Fae, I was like, no, this better turn around, like this better end in a good note, and it did. So I do recommend that book. I think that's a great book. I probably rated it a 4.5, I'm gonna say. And then I started reading What You Are Looking For Is in the Library. I started that on January 30th, and then I finished it on the 6th. I read on the 1st, the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th is when I finished it. That book was such a good book, and I rated that one 5 stars, I know for sure, because I really enjoyed it. It's a very short book because it's composed of, I think, 4 or 5 different stories, and I had come across that book through, I think, like an Instagram reel or a TikTok. Some bookstore worker was recommending it, and they said it was like one of their favorite books from the previous year, and so that's why I read it at the beginning of the following year. And I just think it's like one of those really great books that if you're having like a tough time with your career or like with school or like with your relationships, I just feel like it's one of those books that really shifts your perspective so that you can really understand like what it is that you're wanting, and not necessarily just like the surface level of what you're looking for. It's actually, there's like this deeper meaning, there's this like deeper purpose that you're trying to like dive into. It's easy to read, it's pretty straightforward, but it's still in its own way very poetic, very relatable, and I highly recommend it, especially in the beginning of the year. If you're looking for a book at the beginning of the year, I think that's a good one to pick up because it's short. Since they're composed of like 5 different stories, just read one story, and then like the next day read the other one, and I feel like you'll get through it pretty quickly. The second book that I read in February was Kismet Connection, and this book, I read it from the 12th to the 14th. I read it in 3 days. It's a YA romance. It's a friends to lovers romance, and I really, really liked it. I remember at the time a lot of people were talking about Lynn Painter's Better Than the Movies, and I did read that book. I read it the previous year, and I remember thinking when I was reading it how annoyed I was by the main female character. I just felt like she was so immature, and it's like, well, obviously she's immature because she's a high schooler. There was just something about it that I didn't really like very much, and it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people really, really like it. But after reading Kismet Connection, I understood why I didn't like it as much, and it's because in this novel, the main couple, they already have like self-awareness of themselves and of the other person, and I just felt like she really captured that feeling of like being in love for the first time. And there were so many so many beautiful parts in that book that I felt like, oh, I'm like reliving that feeling again. And if you liked Better Than the Movies, I think you should read Kismet Connection. I hope you will like it because I enjoyed it much more than I did Better Than the Movies. And also, it's a diverse read. And that book was also that author's first, it's like her debut novel. So after Kismet Connection, I read Cackle, which is like a witchy, I don't know if I want to call it a romance, but it's like a witchy novel. I started it on the 18th, finished it on the 20th, so that was another like 3-sitting book. And this one I think I rated a little bit lower. It wasn't my absolute favorite. There were definitely parts that were very gripping, and I think the character development was really good. It was also really atmospheric because it's in like a small town, but I just felt like the plot was kind of lacking. There's something that fell really flat with it. It had its moments, but I think as a whole, it wasn't, like I said, my favorite. I think it was like a 3-star, maybe even a 2.5. And then I started reading Never by Jessa Hastings on the 21st. And then I finished it on the 25th. I read it on the 21st, the 23rd, and the 25th. So again, another like 3-sitting kind of book. I started out slow, and then I think I read like the majority of the book on the last day. I finished it like on a Sunday and just spent the whole day trying to read through the whole entire book. This was also the first book that I annotated. It's the only book that I annotated in the year, in the whole entire year. I had every intention of like annotating more, but a lot of the books that I read are library books, so I'm not really able to annotate. But if anybody has tips on how they annotate their books for library books, let me know, because I would love to do that still. Just because I have a tendency to forget a lot of like really important things in books, and when I annotate them, I feel like I can quickly see my favorite parts and like go back and reread things. But I like really annotated the heck out of this book. This was a 5-star read for me. I'm a big Peter Pan lover of the entire like universe of Peter Pan. I love every iteration of it. I think there was only like one iteration of it. I think it was like a TV series that I was like not too keen on, but pretty much every other version of it I'm into, and I'm very excited for the second book to come out because the cliffhanger was just, it was too much for me. I need to know what happens like right now. And then I finished off the month reading Snow and Rose by Emily Winfield. What's her name? Emily Winfield Martin. I have a couple of children's books from her for Ellie. The ones that I have for Ellie are like children's picture books, but Snow and Rose is a children's fiction chapter book based off of the original Snow and Rose story. I loved this book. It was very atmospheric. It had beautiful illustrations throughout the entire book, and it was just like a nice, easy read to cap off the end of the month, kind of like put another notch in the belt because it was so quick to read, and there was only like 2 more days left in the month, and I was like, maybe let's see if I can read another book before the end of the month. I want to say this was probably like a solid like 3.5. I think you need to be in the mood to read those types of books. Otherwise, I think you might get bored and you might fall asleep. But I think I was in a space where there was so much plot happening in Never that like I wanted to bring it down a little bit, and Snow and Rose really was that calm book that I needed at the end of the month. And then this is where I made a mistake, because in the beginning of March I started The Last Unicorn. I started on the 4th and then I finished it on the 7th, so this was 4 sittings all in a row. But I think I should have read another book in between Snow and Rose and The Last Unicorn because I was bored. I never watched the animated movie. I was never really familiar with the story, so I didn't have any previous connection to the story. Maybe if I had seen the movie as a kid, I probably would have had more of like a nostalgic feel for it, but I just didn't really enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to. And again, maybe it was just the season that I was in. It probably wasn't the right time. I probably gave this one like a 2.5 star. Again, don't come at me for it. It wasn't the one for me. On March 11th, I started reading The Midnight Library. That was a book that was suggested to me by my best friend. She had read it a couple years before, and I had always had it in the back of my head, and then it finally became available to me at the library, and I enjoyed this one a lot. I read it on the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th. So finished it in 3 sittings, and I'm pretty sure I gave this one 5 stars. I don't think I cried, but I think I like teared up a little bit. Again, if there's something involving kids, I'm probably gonna be sensitive about it. Nothing bad happened to the kids, but there is like an emotional connection with children, and that part really hit for me. And I just thought it was a really great book that had something interesting going on at every chapter. The premise of the book, it's basically this woman who, I think she commits suicide. Basically, she's in limbo. She's not in heaven, and she's not like dead per se, or I guess she is, but like there's a chance that she could go back. And so she gets to live out her life in many different scenarios of how her life could have gone if she chose a different path. So she's kind of trying to figure out what the right choice was for her. And because of that, you're getting all of these different stories. And it was just a very engaging book, and very much relatable. On March 14th, I started The Grace of Wild Things. This one I finished in 2 sittings. I read it on the 14th, and then I picked it back up again on the 17th. This is another like children's literature, children's fiction book, and it was actually based off of Anne of Green Gables, which I haven't read Anne of Green Gables in a really long time, like not since I was in, I don't know, like grade school. And I never finished the Netflix series either. I stopped when the 2 like con artists moved into the house, because I was just like, no, I don't want to see these baddies come into this beautiful home and wreck this family. So I stopped watching it, which is dumb because I should just pick it back up again. But yeah, The Grace of Wild Things is actually like a retelling, or like a reimagining of Anne of Green Gables. The difference is there's like a magical spin on it, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. Again, very easy to read, very atmospheric, and low stakes, but still fun, still engaging. That's my style. I want something to be low stakes. I don't want to be like, you know, freaked out. I don't want to be traumatized, but I need something just like a little bit extra just to keep me turning the pages. On March 25th, I picked up the first book in the Shady Hollow series, which is Shady Hollow, and that was like the beginning of like my mystery love affair, basically. I finished, sorry, I'm looking at my phone because I have all the information on my phone and then my phone's going off. So I finished Shady Hollow in 4 sittings. Shady Hollow is written by Juno Black. Juno Black is the pen name for 2 authors, Jocelyn Cole and Sharon Nagel. I believe there's 5, or I think the 6th book is gonna come out at the end of this year, and then they have like 2 short stories. The way that I describe Shady Hollow is kind of like Zootopia with a little bit more of like Fantastic Mr. Fox vibes, and very atmospheric, a very cozy mystery. Obviously it's a murder mystery. It is a little bit predictable, but it's still enjoyable. Right after I finished Shady Hollow, I picked up Cold Clay. I read that on the 30th, the 31st, and then the 1st and the 2nd of April. I think I was just so taken by the characters in this series that I wanted to continue to the second one right away, and it did not disappoint. I think I rated both of them like 4.5 stars. This is definitely an auto-buy author for me. And then in April, I kind of fell off a bit. I went through a reading slump because Cold Clay was the only book that I finished in the month of April. I did start Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. I started it on the 16th, literally only read 20 pages. On the 17th, only read 23 pages. And then on the 18th, read 49 pages. So I got through, what is it? Didn't even get through like 100 pages at all. But I think I was just in, like I said, I was just in a slump. I wasn't feeling it. I got the book like right when it first came out. There were so many people who had the book on hold, so I couldn't renew my borrowing time at the library. So I think the book was literally due on the 19th, and that's why I couldn't continue reading it. But I was like, no worries, I'll just put it back on hold later. And yeah, April was just kind of like a dud month for me, but sometimes that happens. In May, I picked back up with The Kiss Curse. It's the sequel to The Ex-Hex by by Erin Sterling. And again, was in love with this book. I think I gave this one like a 5-star rating. It was so fun. It was very spicy, but really fun. Super, super fun. And I really love that like small town vibe as well. 3 sittings. I was just eating it up. I was just giggling reading it. Usually when I'm going through a book slump, I find that I can get back into reading again when I pick up a romance novel. And romance novels are really, honestly, like what I first started to read when I took up reading as like a hobby again. On May 13th, I switched it up and I read Keeper of Enchanted Rooms by Charlie N. Holmberg. And this is actually a series, which I probably need to put the rest of these books in my library holds because I did enjoy this book very much. This one had a slow burn romance, which I really enjoyed. You know, I do read some spicy books, but sometimes it's nice to have just a little more of a toned down romance that really has like that yearning and like, you know, adoration that like you don't get from spicy novels where it's just like, all right, we're into each other, you know what I mean? This one was a really cool story. Basically, this guy moves into a house that he inherits from like a long lost relative, and the house is kind of like possessed, and so there is a group of people who go and kind of like do exorcisms on houses because it's pretty common for houses to have like spiritual entities. And so this woman goes to kind of like reason with the house and see like what it is that they want. This is the problem that I have with getting library books and not owning them, is because sometimes I just forget what happens, and I know that I enjoyed the book so much, but I can't remember. So I feel like in order for me to read the series, the entire series, I'll probably need to check out the first book again and reread it. But I don't think I'll have a problem. Like, I don't mind doing that. I do want to read the rest of the series because it's just that very fun, magical realism type of book. There's like multiple storylines that you're getting. You're kind of like piecing together the whole entire story and trying to figure out what's going on. It was very unexpected and I loved it. I don't remember what I rated it. Probably a 4.5. I'm very generous with my ratings, but if I don't like it, it's like 2, you know? So this one was probably like a 4 or 4.5. The next book that I read, I started on May 23rd, and it was Dial A for Aunties, and I finished that in 3 days. And I gave this one 4 stars. I actually put the star rating on here. How great. But this one was such a romp of a book to read. It was so fun. It was so funny, very fast paced, like a lot of like moving parts, a lot of like, you know, high like energy, and just like really funny. I was laughing out loud. And then also, you know, it's a diverse read. So if that's something that matters to you, that you want to like implement in your reading for this year, that's a fun one. It gave like Crazy Rich Asians meets Weekend at Bernie's. That's what I remember about it. I finished off the month reading Arsenic and Adobo. This is the first book in the Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mystery series, and I loved this book. It's by a Filipino American author, and there's a lot of like food involved within the story, food that I'm familiar with as well. It was very relatable and made me very hungry. And I liked that at the end of the book, it gives you some recipes if you want to try making any of the things that they mention in the book. But that one was really fun. It is a murder mystery series. It didn't make me feel like scared or anything like that. But it definitely threw me for a loop. I did not expect the murderer to be the person that it was. I had like 2 suspects and it was neither of them. So it is definitely something that kept me on my toes and really threw me for a loop, like I said. Okay, getting into June. I'm gonna try and like get a little quicker. I don't want this video to be like hours long. June 2nd, I started reading A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon. Again, I have a type. And I read this in 3 sittings. I read it on the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th, and I gave this 5 stars. This whole universe I loved. It was very diverse. It involves like witches and demons and fairies and they don't call them mermaids. What do they call them? Naiads. There's a lot of like fun mythical creatures that are involved. I would say it's probably kind of like giving a little bit of like small town Dungeons and Dragons romance, maybe. I don't know. But I feel like it's not really Dungeons and Dragons because like there's no like big quest going on. But with all the mythical creatures, like that's the element that I'm putting in there. But I did really enjoy that book. Again, 5 stars. June 5th, I started reading One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, and loved this book. I thought it was so cool. It definitely has like a darker undertone, like a much darker undertone than anything that I've read previously, but I really liked it. It wasn't too creepy. It was like just enough creepiness, you know what I mean? In the front of every chapter there were these like cards basically that had poetry written on it, and kind of giving like a little foreshadowing of what the next chapter was about. And I loved reading those parts. I love little things like that, little elements like that kind of dive you deeper into the story and put you into the atmosphere. And I do have Two Twisted Crowns upstairs. I've yet to read it, but it is on my TBR, and I think I want to read it this month if I can. But I might read One Dark Window again before it, just because I want to be able to like read them back to back and annotate them. There was so much in One Dark Window that I wanted to like write down and like highlight quotes, and like there's so many parts that were very memorable. Oh, I don't know if I said this. I started on the 5th. I read it on the 5th, the 6th, the 9th, the 10th, and then I finished it on the 11th. So this one had 5 sittings. It's a little bit bigger of a book, so that's the reasoning for that. I did read Funny Story. I started that on the 16th, and I finished it on the 18th. 3 sittings, 5 stars, no notes. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Everything that everybody says about it is true. I don't think you need my review of it, because there's so many other better book talkers, like official book talkers, official booktubers that will give you a better review of it. But I loved it. I thought it was a great book. And then I finished off the month reading the 3rd book in the Shady Hollow series, which is Mirror Lake. I read that in 3 sittings. I read it on the 24th, the 25th, and the 26th. Again, a 4-star read for me. And I just feel like the whole entire series is like a 4.5 star read. And I know that seems like, oh, well, is it really then that great? Because it's not like 5 stars. But I think the reason why I didn't give it 5 stars is just because it's more about that atmosphere and the coziness and the very slow and steady pace of it that I enjoy. It's not super like heart palpitating. There's not like a lot of like action going on to really like blow my mind. And like I said, it is a little bit predictable, so that's probably why I didn't give it like 5 stars. And I haven't yet given any of the Shady Hollow series books 5 stars, just because I can tell right away when someone is going to be the murderer. But I still enjoy it very much, and I still think it's like one of those books that I will always go back to if I just want a chill book to read. On June 30th, I picked up the sequel to A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon, and that is A Demon's Guide to Wooing a Witch. And this one, I still enjoyed it, but I gave this one a lower rating. I gave this one 3.75 stars. And the reasoning for this is because in the first book, you're dealing with a witch and a demon. And then in the second book, it's the same thing. It's a witch and a demon. And I just felt like that there wasn't enough of a switch up for me to feel like I was getting a different story. The characters are completely different, for sure, like their personalities, but the dynamic between the two was still very, very similar. But there is a lot of representation. It did dive into like really important issues that can translate into like our world, but I just felt like the storyline between the actual like romance of it wasn't giving me anything different from what I read from the first book. So that's why I gave it like a little bit of a lower rating. On July 4th, I started reading A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. This is the first Ashley Poston book that I picked up, and I finished it in 3 days, 3 sittings, the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th, and I gave this one 5 stars. I'm a magical realism girly. I love it, and I just thought that the concept was so cool. The main male character was so like, he was great. And the dynamic between the two was great. And I had my suspicions about like who he was and like his story and like how he fit within the town. And I was right. I predicted it, but I still enjoyed it. Predictable, but enjoyable. On the 8th, I picked up The Only Purple House in Town, and I finished this in 4 sittings, and I only gave this one a 2.5 star rating. I think all of the characters except for the 2 main characters were interesting, but the two main characters I was very bored with, and I was very bored with their relationship. And what sucks too is that was a book that I actually picked up at the store. It wasn't a book that I got from the library, and I feel like I have this bad luck of buying books and then giving them low ratings, and then borrowing books from the libraries and giving them such high ratings that I'm absolutely regretting not purchasing them and, you know, being able to like own them in my personal library and like annotating them. But I had another win. On July 27th, I picked up Happy Medium. I read this in 5 sittings, and this one I gave 4 stars. This one was a really cool one. Me and my husband watched the show Ghosts. If you like the show Ghosts, I think you'll like Happy Medium. It's about a girl who portrays as someone who can talk to ghosts, and she makes a living off of it. And someone asks her to go and help out a friend at this goat farm. The owner is trying to sell it, and he's having troubles with selling the goat farm because the ghost is like causing problems. And so she goes to the goat farm to try and convince the guy to let her help, but the guy is completely skeptical of her abilities, as he should be, because he's right, she's a fake. But to her surprise, when she gets there, she actually can see the ghost. So it was really cool. There's really no explanation of how she's able to see this ghost, and I kind of like that about it. It's just kind of like this unknown freak thing that she can see this one particular ghost. In August, I read The 7-Year Slip. I started that on the 11th, and then I finished it on the 13th. So another 3-sitting book, and another 5-star read for me. I think her writing is really beautiful and very like emotional writing. Definitely gave a little bit of like the Lake House vibes, if you're familiar with that movie. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I said, 5 stars for me. Oh, give me a second, the baby's crying. Okay. Well, that took way longer than I wanted it to, because now it's very, very late. I literally don't even know where I left off. Finished The 7-Year Slip on the 13th, a 5-star read. August 14th, I started reading The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love. That's by India Holton. I read her Dangerous Damsels series the summer of 2023. Fell in love with it. They're all like interconnected standalones, and I love the world building. I want to say they're almost like historical romances with a little bit of like magic thrown in there, but they're very like action packed. I want to say like kind of like gives the vibes of like Enola Holmes, but with like magic involved, with like witches and like assassins and pirates involved. So when she was coming out with this new series, I was right on board. I was like super excited for it. This is book 1 in the Love's Academic series. The second book involves a geographer who we've already been introduced to in the first book. So I'm very excited for the entire series. I gave this book 4 stars. Her writing is just very witty. There's a lot of like really good, I don't want to say punchlines because I don't want it to sound like it's cheesy, but she has a lot of like hard-hitting, like witty characters. So there's really good banter between the main couple. Another thing that I like about her stories is that the women are really independent and they can really stand on their own and like take care of themselves, and they are not really needing anybody to come in and like try and like rescue them or anything like that, but they just so happen to kind of like fall into a relationship or like, you know, kind of get into like close quarters with their, you know, significant others, or like their love interests basically. But yeah, I had a fun time reading this book. Only 2 books in the month of August, but I wasn't too worried about that because this was literally like the month after I had given birth. 2 books is still a lot considering that I had a newborn. In September, I started The Dead Romantics on the 1st. Again, another Ashley Poston book, and I finished that again in 3 sittings. I read it on the 1st, the 2nd, and the 4th, and I gave this one 4 stars. This is one of the Ashley Poston books that I feel I saw like the least or like the worst reviews of all of her books. I feel like a lot of people did not like it, and I really enjoyed it. I think she's just more my style in terms of her writing and the storyline. Again, I'm someone who likes magical realism. Her being able to see a dead person did not throw me off. You know what I mean? On September 12th, I started Last Chance Books, which is another YA romance. I gave it 4 stars. It's a little bit like You've Got Mail, rival bookstores, but with teenagers. On September 16th, I picked up the last book in the Glimmer Falls series, which is A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire. This one I enjoyed much more than the second book, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. I finished this in 5 sittings. I laughed out loud so many times while reading this book. The characters were just so funny. I wrote page 103, LOL, when she threw cheese at him and called it instinct. The main female character, she was very out of her element in the town, and so seeing her kind of like get her sea legs together of like trying to be like a normal person around everybody else was really, really fun. And the main male character he's just like this really sweet, timid, sincere guy. They touch a lot on like mental health, and I really liked that. One of the things that I thought that the author described well was like how he handles his social anxieties and his inner confidence. But the entire series, I loved it. I was disappointed when I found out that they weren't going to continue the series with a 4th book. I would have really liked it if they had one more book that that featured the other like best friend. There's like a group of best friends and you're following like one of them. The 3rd book kind of took like a little bit of a detour. It's like one of the best friend's boss. Like it's like the guy that she works for. And then, but they're all still like really great friends. And then the 3rd girl best friend, who happens to be a Filipina pixie. I mean, come on. We should get that story, but we didn't. And that was like one of the things that I was like a little bit disappointed about, because we're not getting that story from her, unfortunately. The next book that I read was Bewitched, and Bewitched is a sequel in the Toil and Trouble series. So this was a sequel to The Witch is Back, which I read at the end of 2023. Which was a book that I was pleasantly surprised about. And so when I saw that there was a sequel, I was like, yeah, I want to read it. I know I'm going to like it. And I did. I gave this one 5 stars. Again, this is the reason why I feel like I probably should have bought this book, so that I could like annotate, take notes, and like do a full-on book report on it, because I forget what happened in the book, but I know that I enjoyed it a lot. So just take my word and pick it up. It's a good one. I finished off the month of September reading Twilight Falls. Actually, no, wait. I started it on the 26th, read some of it on the 29th, and then finished it in October, on October 1st. So 3 sittings. Twilight Falls is the 4th book in this Shady Hollow series. A 4-star read, just a comfort read is what I would label that. It's not something that I would say is like blowing my mind, but it's something that is like really like feeding my heart and my soul. It's like a nice, warm, cozy hug, even though they are murder mysteries. And that, I think, is saying something. The next book that I read in October was Homicide in Hollow Hollow. This is the 2nd book in Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mystery series. I read this in 3 sittings. I read it on the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th, and I gave this one 4 stars. Again, another like twisty book where I had no idea who the killer was, and when I found out who it was, I was shocked. It's a small town as well, so there's not a lot of people to choose from, but all signs were not pointing to this person. It really surprised me. And then this is the month that I picked up Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands again. I started it on the 12th, the 13th, and the 16th. So I finished this in 3 sittings. When I picked it up again, I was feeling bored with it. But maybe I wasn't bored, maybe I was just tired. Nighttime is usually when I do my reading, and if it's a book that is not completely grabbing my attention, it's a little bit harder for me to stay hooked on the story. So this is one that I had to listen to the audiobook while reading along. And I know that that seems like weird, but it actually helped me read it a lot faster and get into the story a little bit better, because I think Emily Wilde, that realm is like so atmospheric and so cozy that I was just starting to like doze off. I just needed a little bit more of a something to like really drive it home for me, and the audiobook really helped. And I think it helped mainly because the narrator had an accent, and she does all the little voices too for like Poe and also for Wendell. And also particularly with this series, there's a lot of like cities and words that are in a different language. So it was nice to have the narrator say the words so I'm not just like making up how they pronounce in my head. So very helpful. That's a good tip, I feel. And then the last book that I finished out in October is This Spells Love, and I gave that one a 4-star rating. I finished it in one day. That's how fun it was. I had a great time. Another like magical realism book. She's not a witch, although she does do some sort of like a love spell, and it backfires, and all of a sudden she's in this alternate universe, and she can't really decide if her alternate universe is better than where she was before, or if she needs to go back and just like correct herself. But it was fun. It was a very fun read. 4 stars. In November, this is where I fall off. I listened to Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood, and I listened to that in an audiobook, and I finished that in a day because on Spotify I think it's only like 4 hours. It's like a really quick book, but it was really fun. I didn't rate it here. I think it was like a 3.5, take it or leave it. Like I wouldn't say that it's something that like you have to read. I know that Ali Hazelwood kind of has like either you love her or you hate her, but I think because it revolved around like the gaming industry, I was like interested because I like to play video games. It was just like a cute, quick, spicy listen, something to mix it up because I wasn't reading as often. I did start Little Women because I started it for the Leve Book Club, but I just did not have the energy to finish it. And also during this time I had family visiting, so I was like really focused on like being with my family at this time. In December I listened to 2 other audiobooks. The first one was Practice Makes Perfect. I know that I listened to this out of order, but I actually listened to Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams, I think. I listened to it earlier on in the year. I can't remember what month I actually listened to it, but I really enjoyed the audiobook. I think the narrators for this book are really great. It's dual point of view, so there's like, you know, the female narrator and the male narrator. So because I listened to Practice Makes Perfect a second time, I was like, I might as well listen to When in Rome. So I listened to When in Rome right afterwards and loved it as well. I really like her writing style. The storyline was really good and captivating. When in Rome and Practice Makes Perfect, I feel like I would listen to those audiobooks like again and again. I feel like those audiobooks feel like my guilty pleasure rom-coms. Like nowadays, it's really hard to find romantic comedy movies that feel like comforting and like ones that I would watch again and again and again. Like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. I'd watch it again and again. 13 Going on 30 on repeat. But there hasn't been a movie, a rom-com in a really long time that I would rewatch over and over and over again. Nothing is giving me that feeling, but those 2 audiobooks I feel like they are. And I do know she's coming out with the 3rd book in the series soon, so I'm excited for that as well. I can't decide if I want to pick up the actual physical book or if I want to just listen to it as an audiobook, but I think I might just listen to it as an audiobook, but we'll see. We'll see how I feel when it comes out. I know that there's probably going to be a total of 4 in the series because there is 4 siblings. And those are all of the books that I read in 2024. I do feel like I gave quite a few 5-star ratings. There's also quite a few books that I read in 2024 that I feel like I want to read them again. Like One Dark Window I want to read again because I want to annotate it and I want to read it before I read Two Twisted Crowns. And then the same thing with Keeper of Enchanted Rooms. I didn't even like realize that it was part of a series, and now I'm like, okay, if I want to finish off the rest of the series, I feel like I need to start over and kind of like finish completely. I hope you enjoyed my 2024 reading wrap up. Thank you so much for sticking around and listening to me yap about all the books that I read. I know that there's plenty of other people on YouTube who have read way more books than me, but as a mom of two, a 4-year-old and a almost 5-month-old, I'm very busy. Reading 38 books in a year is a very big accomplishment for me. Even, I mean, like reading how many? 35 physical books is a very big accomplishment for me. I'm very proud of myself for getting through that many books. But again, thank you so much for joining me in today's video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.